What's going on, guys? It's Michael Lee from GBU. Today we're going to show you how to build a stage 3 from scratch. Now we're going to pull apart this whole Wells blaster. We're going to go all the way down to the gearbox. We're going to open the gearbox up. I'm going to go through, I'll show you some of my tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. Now do keep in mind, not everybody builds the same, but this is the way I like to build, and I'm sure it's easy enough for you to follow along and do it yourself at home. But nonetheless, guys, let's get cracking and see what we get up to. This is a standard metal Wells. An absolute sleeper of a build. Sweet, so as you can see, guys, we are going with the Wells CQB. Now this is a full metal blaster, which means it does have a metal gearbox inside of it. So essentially, we're going to tear it down. We're not going to change anything on the outside. We're just going to solely work on the inside and show you guys how we'd like to build them and the differences between a standard one and a full custom one. Now, again, as I said, let's get started. Start by taking off the upper and the rear end, and then that way we can get access to the gearbox itself. And just like that, guys, we have taken the upper off. Now it's time to take the rear end off. So to take the rear end off, you will need a 2.5mm hex head. Simply take out the 2 screws either side. One. And then that will simply slide off like so. Go ahead and set that to the side. And then in the rear end of it, there is actually a Phillips head screw, so which we'll go ahead now and take off. Again, set that to the side. Then we can start on the lower. Simply get a smaller Phillips head so you can take out these 2 bottom screws here, which will then give you access to the pistol grip as well. And that's your old motor, which you will go ahead and you can either keep it or just chuck it out, because we are going to replace it with an SHS motor. And then inside of the grip itself, there will be another 2 Phillips head screws. So we'll go ahead and remove those. Sweet, and then we're down to just the gearbox and the lower half of the receiver. So simply start ahead by knocking out the center pin like so. Go ahead and keep that to the side. And then we have our mag release here, which you will need a 1.5mm hex head just to undo that. Now do keep in mind, depending on your blaster, it may be a 1.5, it may be a 2mm, or it may be a Phillips head screw as well. So that's done. So to gain access to this bolt here, you will need a flat head. Simply slide it down the other side of the gearbox like so. Just a little tap. And that will put enough pressure to allow this screw to be undone. Otherwise it will just spin on itself. Again, set that to the side. And there we have it, guys. We have the gearbox out of the receiver. Now we can actually go in and actually start our modification on this particular gearbox. So first off, you do want to release the spring retainer, which I do use just a Phillips head screwdriver. Simply push it in, twist it either way depending on how you want to twist it. Keep that, put it to the side. You can chuck out your old spring because we will be putting a fresh spring in. So this particular box here, to gain access to the internals, we do need a 2mm hex head. Generic boxes, you will need like a Phillips head, but 9 times out of 10, it will be a hex head. Sweet, now that all those screws are actually out, now we want to simply open this thing up. Just be mindful because there is springs and stuff in there which you don't want to lose. So just like so, you now have a completely open gearbox. Now because we are going to be re-shimming this, we do want to clear out any excess shims that were from factory or the grease. So simply grab yourself a rag and just give it a good wipe out. You will see the shims, just kind of flick them away. That one's good to go. All right, sweet. Now that we're actually onto the lower half of the gearbox, you simply just want to take out your cylinder head cylinder. You want to chuck away the current piston because you won't really need it. But the rest of it, just set it to the side because we will come back to that. Now again with the gears, simply remove them. I do like to keep the reverse latch because there's nothing wrong with it. We'll just change out the spring and put a better quality spring. Now, with the wells in particular, there is a sector delay chip that sits on top of the sector gear. Now you do want to remove that and put it onto your brand new set of gears. So again, we'll go ahead and we'll take that off. And set that to the side. Now, like what we did to the top, we'll do to the bottom and wipe away any excess grease or shims that may be still in there. Now we're good to go. So the gear set that I will be using today will be 18:1s. Now that's just to replicate the original set of gears that were in there. So when we do a comparison between this and a standard one at the end, that there's no big differences in speed rather than just the power that is caused by the upgrade of the spring, O-ring and motor and stuff like that. So again, let's go ahead and put these 18:1 gears inside of this gearbox. So first step, go ahead and grab that sector delay chip that you did actually take off the original set of gears and simply pop that on. So it does just sit on there by pressure, don't need glue or any fancy stuff like that. Again, set that to the side. Now we're going to start shimming the gearbox. Now I do have Fighting Bro shims here next to me, which is a 0.5, a 0.3, a 0.2 and a 0.1. Now starting off, now you do need the gears to simply be, let's say 0.1 to maybe 0.2 above height of the other gear. So that way they're not rubbing on each other and causing further damage to the gears down the track. So again, as I stated at the very start, everybody does build completely different. How I build isn't how Joe builds or Bob or anyone. So again, keep that in mind. Build to your standard. If you feel like it needs more, do more. If you feel like it needs less, do less. So essentially, to start off, you want to make sure that there's enough movement in there where that's not grinding on each other. There's a bit of free movement, like so. So now that we have kind of a rough idea on how the gears are placed and the shims, we'll go ahead and we'll just put the top half of the gearbox on. Check to see if there's any wiggle within the gears. If there is, we do want to attend to that and make sure that they're not too loose, make sure they're not too tight. See, right now they're a bit loose, so they're locking up. So essentially that's right where we want to be, nice and free in there, nothing's grabbing and they're not grinding on each other, so they are spinning and there's no movement in there, which is great. So again, now we can start aligning it with the piston as well, so we may have to take away or add. So for the piston, we are going to be using an SHS piston, which does have a carbon steel rack on the bottom of it and a polymer body. Now this does run a double O-ring system. Which the standard generic one will be a black O-ring, but simply we'll take that off and we'll put a green one on there. And there we have it. So that's the upgraded O-ring. Now this one is a bit larger. So essentially once it does go into the cylinder, it'll actually create a bit more of a suction. So that way when it comes in, there's no air escaping from the rear end of the cylinder. Where with the generic one, there will be expulsion of air coming from behind it because it is a bit smaller. So again, that is actually quite good. I'm actually quite happy with how that is, so I won't need to do any modifications to the piston today, which is great. So again, now we can simply go back through, we can grease up the gears, make sure they're all nice and free, set up the cylinder head, cylinder and the piston, and then we can get back to rebuilding. Now with the grease, you don't need to go super excessive, just a small piece on either side of the shim, essentially just to hold it there, really. So, another one. Yeah, the only real gear that I do put the grease onto will be the spur gear here. Why is that being weird? That's fine. There we go. Again, it's not too much grease, but simply just work it around like so, because then what's going to happen is once the sector's on there and starts spinning on it, it's actually then going to grease the sector, which is then going to grease the bevel. So again, 1 point then feeds all three, rather than fully caking it out with grease, as we do see in some parts of some builds. So again, we'll go ahead and put the sector gear in, give it a good spin. As you can see, everything's moving nice and freely. It's not grinding, it's not grabbing. we want to go ahead and install our cylinder and cylinder head. Now one tip I have learned over the years of building is just to run a little bit of grease on the return spring. Don't ask me why, but it just seems to stop them from breaking. I think out of all the builds that I've built in the last 5 to 6 years, we've had maybe 5 return springs break. Again, whether that's from this, not too sure, but it works. Now with the piston, I do like to run just a little bit of grease along the rack. Again, that's just to help feed back into the gearbox itself. So again, not too much, just enough. So it's that. So again, I do have here is an upgraded spring. I'm not too sure if you can see it from there, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to install it onto the anti-reverse latch. This part can be a bit tricky, so make sure you are patient. Simply hold it down with your hex head if you have one. Grab your bevel. Which one? There. So hold it down with your hex head. Grab your bevel. Simply slide it in like so. Grab your top half of the gearbox. Gently put it on. And then kind of just align where the anti-reverse latch meets the hole. And then essentially you have a closed gearbox with the gears inside. Now we'll go ahead and start to put all these screws back in. Now, if you are wanting to go a faster gear set, the same method applies to as what I've just shown you guys here, but with certain gear sets, there is a more, but with certain gear sets, you will have to shim a little different accordingly to the gears, because some have bigger posts, shorter posts, and so forth. You may have to do modification as well to the piston to allow the timing to be right when the piston recycles. This one's a little tight. So as you can see guys, with the method of just putting the grease on top of the gear post where the shims are, you actually deduct all the grease that expels outside of these holes, which again, in the past we have come across builds where it's been overflowing, it's just been completely nasty. So again, the smallest bit of grease will go a long way. Now for the spring that we are going to be using today will be an SHS M100 spring. Nothing too crazy, but enough to keep the FPS where it kind of needs to be, where it's going to be a bit more consistent, a little more powerful than what it would be out of the box. So again, put that in. Now, key factor with the spring, on the backside here, you will see that there's a stack of coils that kind of compile together, where on the other side it spreads out like so. Now this end always has to be at the rear of the gearbox, just to allow maximum compression. Again, grab your screwdriver, simply put it in and twist. And there you have it, guys. There's complete stage 3 gearbox. Now we'll go ahead and put it into the receiver, build it back up. So we are going to use an amoeba grip, which it just meshes a lot better than say what the standard one does, given the angle and the way you can actually adjust the height of the motor. And it just looks better as well. So same way we put it apart, we'll put it back together. Now we can go ahead and put on the grip. Now keep in mind, you may actually have to crimp these connections here because they seem to be a little larger than what it is for the post on the SHS motor. It can be a pain to put in sometimes, so I do like to just put a bit of grease on the end of the screwdriver just to kind of hold it on there like so. And then that's kind of it with the grip. Again, it looks a lot nicer than what the standard one does, so we'll go ahead and go from there. Now we'll put the motor in. Again, like I did say, you will have to crimp the actual connections. Don't do it too much, just enough pressure just to kind of tighten them a little bit, because otherwise they will be too tight and then it'll just be a headache and you'll have to go back and forth. So essentially there is a red and a black wire. Red goes to red, black goes to black. Now with this particular grip, the motor adjustment screw does actually come with a small O-ring. So make sure you go ahead and put that O-ring on. Like so. And then you will need a flathead screwdriver. So I do like to start off maybe 3 turns in, the whole way in, because that way when I actually go to plug the battery in and test it, I can adjust it from bottom to top. Otherwise, if it's too far out, then it's just going to spin and it may cause damage to the gears. So at least this way we have a bit of connection to the gears and we can adjust from there. So now we'll go ahead and continue building the upper, T-piece and barrel. This part can be a little tricky, so bear with me. So what we have here, guys, is a standard metal weld CQB. So we're going to give this a quick chrono test and we'll see what the difference is between this one and the one that we just upgraded. So I'll reset the chrono so there's no funny business. So as you can see, I've got blank canvas. So 230s on semi. Again, 230s on auto as well, as you can see. So that's that. So that's the standard one. Now let's test out the upgraded one and see if there is a big difference between the two. We'll restart the chrono so then we know an accurate reading. Now keep in mind, we did keep the same gear ratio in this one here. All we changed was the actual gears itself, what they're made of, the piston, the O-ring, the spring, and we put a new motor in it. So it is actually naturally going to be a bit quicker than what it would be as a standard blaster. But again, let's see if the FPS has actually increased. So again, it's gone up by, let's say, nearly 100 FPS, guys, just by swapping out. So there we have it. So again, guys, so if this is something that you'd like or you'd want to do, come on down and see 7/18 Bailey Crescent in Southport on the Gold Coast, or these parts are online right now to speak. Peace out.